Okay. Okay, now I'm gonna try debugging this code. So what this is supposed to do is we have three classes, file, email, and document. The document is supposed to serve as the parent class, and email and file are supposed to serve as two independent child classes. And basically, the document will have a text member, will have accessors, mutators, a default constructor, and an overload constructor. We'll also have a two-string method, which is overriding from the object class that all um, classes override in Java. And then email will be a child of document. So I need to essentially find out why the code is not compiling. And so in the main, it will be like a driver function to kind of just show that our classes work as we want. So this function over here it's called contains keyword, and it will check if that specific object contains the specific key in any of its variables. Okay, so to start, I will first clean up my main method with all these pieces of code. I'll empty out the main method. Okay, so first I'm gonna double check that I did everything in document correctly. So we have our string text, we have our accessor, it is of public, return to string, get text. We have our mutator, it is public, void, and it sets the text that's given. So over here, I use this keyword, and how this keyword works is basically that the object that calls this method will have its own text updated with the text that's passed in. And so this keyword helps distinguish the the argument that is passed in with the actual text member of the object that this method is being called on. And then this is our default constructor. So since this is a parent, okay, so the reason we need to even write a default constructor here is because if you don't write a default constructor and you try to create this object in the main object using no parameters, it won't work. So a default constructor is needed when you have other types of constructors. And the reason for this is, okay, let's actually do it the other way. Basically, if you decide to have no constructors in your class, Java behind the scenes will use a custom constructor for you and set all your variables to like no. However, if you decide to have other constructors, like an overload constructor, and an overload constructor, you must make sure to also define a default constructor. And so for your default constructor, it's essentially just left blank because there's nothing to define. Your overloaded constructor, on the other hand, will take in an object. So over here, I've taken in a string and I am updating our text variable, so to s. So over here, you can see I did not use the this keyword. The reason I didn't use the this keyword over here is because there's only one text variable, and so the object will know to update the correct text. And so to show you guys that this is actually working, we will first try to output toString. So this printed out as expected because over here we call the default constructor and we never reset the text. And remember, if you call the default constructor, it just sets all your variables to null, and we got a null output. Now, if I try to use the mutator on this object, say I want to set the text to, hey, today is sunny. And now I try to print out object. The object prints out, hey, today is sunny, because the text was updated. And the reason this worked is over here we used the this keyword to update that. Now, something else I could do alternatively is remove that and call the overloaded constructor and pass that string in its initialization so that the object creates right away with an updated text member. So that's why that prints sunny. And if you look in the overloaded over here, I used text without the this keyword and it updates as expected. Now, if I did use the this keyword here, it would still work. Reason being is because there's only one text variable over here, so we're not confusing it with anything. Now over here, we have a text as a parameter, and we also have a text as a member of this object. And if I don't use this keyword over here, what will happen is that this method over here will use the text that is more local to this function. So over here, say we go back to using a default constructor, and I go back to outputting this using this mutator. Remember this mutator, we remove this keyword, and I run it. We get null despite using the mutator. Reason for this is because this text basically set this text variable to itself. We were not able to access text of the object that we needed to access. So we had to use this keyword. Okay. So with this, we know our document file class works without any errors. So I'm going to save this debug statement into the file itself for future reference. Next, we will work on our first child class, email.java. So we use the extends keyword to show how it's a child class of document. And you can see here this is public. It's also public. Okay, also something else to note is how I don't use any access modifier for our member text. And so what this actually does is it defaults, it uses a default modifier. This default modifier is simply package protected, meaning it can be used by its own class, or it can be used by anything within the same package of that class. So Since since the email class is in the same package as the document class, these this class will be able to access this text variable. So to the email class, I've also added in these variables, sender, recipient, and title. And I have our mutator. So mutators are basically setters. And so I'm using set rec, set sender. Okay. Might change the spelling of this over here. Set receptive, receive. I don't know how to pronounce that. Anyways, title T. Okay. Yeah, so that's working as expected. This is also working as expected, and I've made them public so that we can use them in our main, although we don't really need to use the public keyword since it's in the same package as the main. And now for our constructors, I've created two constructors here. I've created an overloaded constructor and I've created a default constructor. Now, in our default constructor, in our parent class, I didn't put anything in the default constructor. But because this is the child class, you need to make sure to call the parent class's constructor so that the parent part of this child class can create itself. But let me just double check ChatGPT. Okay. So actually over here in our default class, the super keyword is not needed in Java because Java does that automatically. So you don't need to, not needed to explicitly use the super call because Java does that for you. And that's specifically, so what Java does is Java calls the defaults constructor of the parent if you don't specify which one. So over here in my overloaded constructor, I've created a parent object document and I take that in as a parameter and I call the super keyword and I pass in the string of that object keyword. And the point of this is so that I can call the specific constructor of my parent object. So yeah.